everybody, welcome back to Life the Complete Story. As always, I am your host, Tyler, joined by my lovely co-host, Alex.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back once again to Life the Complete Story, episode 10 today. We are starting into the phylum Mollusca, or the mollusks, as they're more commonly known.
We're getting complex now.
Yeah, we're getting much more complex now. This is a very large phylum of invertebrates. So we're not quite to our vertebrates yet. That'll be a good bit later on. It's a much smaller grouping, but
Well, technically, we only have like 3 more groups to cover.
well, 3 more phyla. They're just very large phyla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But first, we start not with nature in the news like we typically do, but with a game. And I literally have in our notes, nature in the news, but actually it's a game. In parentheses, it's a secret. So Alex does not know what this game is. But it does tie in with mollusks. It's a blind ranking.
Oh boy.
So I will give you 5 mollusks.
Alright.
And you have to give me your ranking on how fear-striking they are to you.
Fear-striking. Okay.
Yes. So,
Alright.
so we're going to start.
Is this a I rank it and that's its spot?
Yeah, you have no idea what is next.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm up for this.
Right. So first, we will start with a Humboldt squid.
Humboldt squid. Oh, I'm trying to remember what I know this one. Well, I'll put this one down at like a 4, I think. 'Cause if I remember correctly, they're not like super scary. I think they're big. They're kind of like freaky looking, but they're not like
They are
spooky.
They are found off like the coast of Mexico area.
Okay.
They have the nickname of the Red Devil.
Okay.
But no, they are not really
dangerous
manhunters.
Yeah.
All right. Second.
All right.
Second is also going to be a cephalopod.
Okay.
It's going to be the blue-ringed octopus.
Oh, I was hoping you were going to say that. That guy's going straight to 1. So, for those who don't, first of all, cephalopods, so like your octopi, squids, they are mollusks, actually, and we'll get into that. Probably not this episode, but later, a later episode. But the blue ring octopus, they are actually not that big, but they are super venomous. If you get bit by one of these, it's pretty much lights out.
Yes. Open image. There we go.
Yeah.
So, for those of you that don't know what a blue-ringed octopus looks like, for our video listeners, it is on screen now. For our audio listeners, I will do my best to describe it. They are most often yellow in color with bright blue splotches. They aren't always rings. This is a kind of group of octopus, and they have different identifying marks. But blue lines, blue markings somewhere on their body to indicate.
The one that you have
don't
pulled
touch me, octopus.
Yes. Don't touch this octopus. Do not pick up and handle them. Like I said, if they do bite you, they have an incredibly toxic venom. It's pretty much lights out. That guy's got to go number 1.
Right.
Has to.
Blue-ringed octopus, really scary, really cool. They don't have mouths per se. They have a beak. We'll talk about that later on next week.
Yes.
Blue-ringed octopus are in the genus Hapalochelana for very toxic, venomous, venomous.
They bite. It's venomous.
Octopi found in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. The greater blue-ringed octopus, which is the one I showed on screen. I lied. The southern blue-ringed octopus is the one I showed on screen. The greater blue-ringed octopus is a bit lighter yellow color and a lot more, kind of like an ultraviolet blue. Like it almost looks like the blue glows in the dark. The blue-lined octopus, which, as I said, they don't all have rings. Some of them have lines, as well as the Hapalochelana nearstratzi, which has only had 2 recorded specimens, one in 1938 and one in 2013.
Quite the gap.
quite the gap. So we haven't exactly common named it yet.
Yeah.
But they are all very venomous.
Big no.
Correct. Third on the list is the geography cone. I'm not sure if you know what this is.
I don't know. It sounds like it's a snail.
It is a cone snail.
Oh, cone snail. That guy's got to go number 2. Cone snails are bad news also.
Cone snails are very bad news.
Yeah.
They have a proboscis aperture type thing that comes out of their shell. Excretes
very toxic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very toxic. Very
will mess you up. If not, check you out.
Yes. It has a harpoon-like venom-tipped tooth that it uses to shoot in its prey. Commonly targets fish. We're not on the menu, obviously. We're a lot bigger than cone snails.
It's more of like how snakes are, where it's just a defense mechanism.
Right. Moving on. We will go into the let's go the colossal squid.
Colossal squid. We're gonna put that guy at number 3 just because of size. Like, he is a large, hefty guy.
I forgot to show a picture of the geography cone.
Yeah. While you're doing that, but yeah, colossal squid, not venomous. Not they're just huge. I think 60 meters in length. They get very big. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
so this is geography cone for audio listeners. I don't really know how to describe it. It's kind of just like a snail with a big cone shell. You can see the proboscis that shoots that tooth out, and the anterior side. They're really like a mottled color, kind of blend in really well with the rocks and the around.
Almost looks like a small piece of coral or something.
Yeah. And I will pull up the colossal squid for those of you. Yes, colossal biosciences is not what I want though. They're cool though. Open image in new tab. So this is colossal squid. Very large, very big,
massive,
very scary.
These are like some of the ones that go toe to toe with sperm whales on the regular.
Yeah, they don't exactly affect us as humans. We're off the menu for the opposite reason that we're off the menu of cone snails. We're too small for them. And we're not really in their niche. They are deep sea inhabitants, just like sperm whales, just like giant squids.
Yeah. That is a terrifying thought that we're off the menu because we're too small.
Yeah.
That gives you, like we said, 60 meters, which or no, the colossal squid's the heavier one. The giant squid is the one
bigger.
It's longer. Colossal squid is a little bit short. I mean, still it's like 50 meters, but it's not. It's a little big. Yeah, thicker. It's still massive. I mean, 50 meters is what? I mean, that's over 50 yards. So think those of you who are into like American football, over half a football field in length.
They're going to grow to a mass of 495 kilograms.
That is like half of like an imperial ton. That's like 1,000 pounds.
Yeah, and they are known to grow up to 14 meters, 46 feet.
Oh, okay. They're not as big as I thought. Why did I think they were? I think I confused
the two squids.
Meters and feet.
Mm-hmm.
I think is where I got confused. That is my bad, but that is still very big.
Correct.
Yeah.
Our last species, you have your 5 spot available still.
Yeah. So he's got to go there.
He's got to go there, and he kind of fits here because he's not exactly scary or intimidating. He is the giant Pacific octopus.
Oh yeah, they're just cool. He deserves the 5 spot. Very cool.
Very intelligent.
Yeah, incredibly intelligent. But yeah, not really like dangerous or scary in any way. I mean, they get big. They get probably a few, probably like 4 or 5 feet.
Yeah, in diameter, or like from tentacle to tentacle. Yes, probably about
they get more wide. They don't get quite as long, but it's still pretty cool.
That's something we'll talk about next week. Squids kind of grow more slender and longer, whereas the octopus kind of grow stouter. Like they
Yeah, so yeah, they still get pretty like let me say their arm span about 4.3 meters, so 14 feet from like if they spread out flat from tentacle to tentacle,
Mhm.
14 feet for some of the biggest specimens. So still pretty decent size. I mean, it's about roughly the
That's from
size of a
last week.
room I'm
That's
in.
from last week. Correct. So just to recap Alex's blind ranking of dangerous cephalopods. I'm sure there's more dangerous cephalopods than the 5 I gave you, but
Yeah,
just to recap, number 1 is the blue-ringed octopus, or the genus that is
the blue-ringed
blue-ringed
octopi.
octopi. Followed by the geography cone, a very toxic cone snail species, followed by the colossal squid,
Very big squid.
very big squid, followed by the Humboldt squid, the red devil,
Yeah.
followed by the giant Pacific octopus. Not so scary, but I mean, I do believe there are confirmed kills to a giant Pacific octopus.
But I believe a lot of those are like they attacked like
Or
divers
yeah, it's
and
confusion on what you are.
yeah, they like attacked divers and broke their masks, and unfortunately the divers did not resurface. I think that's where a lot of that comes from.
Right. But that is our substitute for Nature in the News. It's a game. We try to intermix these every once in a while, so we're not just pounding you with knowledge, and we're trying to have some fun as we shoot these episodes on a weekly basis.
Of
Sometimes we
course.
do double shoots, and that's how these games kind of come into fruition is because when we try to do our Nature in the News, we try to give you our as up to date as possible. I know a couple weeks ago we spoke about the chytrid fungus on frogs.
Yes.
I could not find the article that talks about the virus that affects
No.
the chytrid fungus.
I looked. I'd have to find. I'd have to see if I could find
So
it again.
so it's up in the air if that article exists, if it's true
Yeah.
or not. Uh, so yeah, if we find it, it'll be on Facebook. Follow
Yeah.
us on Facebook at Life the Complete Story. Um,
Correct.
we will be moving on to our lesson today. Alex, would you like to give us the general overview of what a mollusk is?
Yeah. So the mollusks are the second largest phylum, just across the animal kingdom. So very large. 70.
Top is obviously the arthropods.
Correct. Yeah. There's
I
a lot
think
of
there's
arthropods.
76,000 species of beetle.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's 76,000 extant species. So those are surviving species of mollusk. But there are somewhere between 60 and 100,000 in fossil records. So they are pretty widespread. About a quarter of all marine life are mollusks. They can be found in both terrestrial. Is that terrestrial or is that supposed to be marine?
Terrestrial.
Terrestrial? Oh yeah, yes. Snails. Duh. And freshwater habitats. So of course they're very diverse in size and structure, as our little game at the beginning talked about. Your cone snails, they're the size of your thumb. They're not big. Some snails are even
Some can go the
smaller.
size of your hand, though.
Some can get very large. Some snails can get like the size of your hand, and then of course up to the giant squid, colossal squid that are
Meters upon
many,
meters.
yeah, like 50 feet roughly. So they can get quite large. Pretty much a body that is primarily muscle. There's a mantle, which is typically like the base kind of would be considered like their foot. Not always though. It has a cavity for the breathing and excretion. A radula, which is kind of like a tongue. It's like
Yeah, it's more like a sandpaper grindy type thing,
yeah,
rather than like our fleshy tongues that we have. It's more like a raspy type thing. Kind of
correct.
grinds down its food.
Correct, yeah. And then those are in all but bivalves. The bivalves are typically filter feeders, and they do have a true nervous system.
Correct.
So this is they actually have like a brain with nerves that control the muscle contraction. So this is more complex than, like we said, the segmented worms who finally had like a nervous system, like a proper nervous system. But now this is getting even more complex, and we'll talk about that in length when we get to the cephalopods. The hypothetical great ancestor, which is like the base level on our tree, our phylogenetic tree, it was a limpet-like shell secreted by the mantle. It had a large muscular foot. So those, kind of like
Yeah,
a
I have
barnacle
pulled up
sort of
for our visual listeners what a limpet is. It's this kind of like roundish cell. And I imagine that the mantle starts at the peak of it and it kind of expands downward over the fleshy, muscular
part of,
body.
yeah. So kind of like I said, the mantle is like that main kind of like a sort of like bulby sort of. That's where most of the majority of the like organs and things are found.
Yes, and in snails it excretes the
Shell.
calcium-based shell.
Yeah, same with like your bivalves, things like that. In
Mhm.
cephalopods, not so much. We will
Right.
get there. Cephalopods are special, but they are coelomates, so they do have a true gut. In nearly all species, the coelom it's small. With the main body cavity, it's called a hemocoel, which is kind of gives way to that open circulatory system. So they're really in some ways they're more complex. Some of those things, like I said, that open circulatory system, they kind of just pump blood into the body. Like
Yeah,
there's no
there is
blood
no
vessels.
there's no vessels, there's no heart. It kind of is just a I don't know how.
Well, they sort of have a heart in the sense that like it pumps to the what would be like the lungs or the gills,
But there's
but
no vessels involved.
yeah,
So it's just a mass of blood.
yeah, they
Or
kind of
a cavity that houses the blood that
yeah,
pumps.
that's
Right.
yeah. And then of course now getting to our classifications, there's a lot of classifications of mollusks. Of course, one of your biggest is gastropoda. So think stomach foot is what that means. These are your snails and your slugs. Think about the
Also including sea slugs and everything in between.
yes, yeah. Your bivalves, so those are your clams, oysters, mussels. I believe like barnacles, things like that. A lot of those are.
You know what I learned today while I
What's
was
that?
doing research for this?
Yeah,
So the abalone, you know what an abalone is,
yeah.
right? Not a bivalve.
No.
No, it's a gastropod.
Oh, actually, that kind of makes sense. Now
Right,
that I
because
think
an
about it.
abalone doesn't have two
Yeah,
halves.
it's just one side.
Because
Okay.
that's what bivalve means is two shell.
Yeah.
Because we'll talk about what a valve is later.
Yeah.
When we
Yeah. Of course, the cephalopods that we've talked about in length at this point, these are your squid, your octopi, your cuttlefish. You have polyplacophora, which are the chitons, which we'll be talking about today, as well as scaphopoda. These are the tusk shells. These are the slightly more simplified mollusks. And then aplacophora and monoplacophora. These are both, those last two we probably won't talk about. They're very small groupings.
They're small orders or they're small classes, very few species, very primitive in structure comparatively to the rest of the things. So we're really gonna focus on those first 5 groups that we covered when we talk about these classifications. And I will start by talking about the polyplacophora. These are your chitons, as we talked about. They have a shell of 9 plates, which are called valves. These are made of aragonite, which is a type of calcium carbonate compound, and they overlap at the front and the back. So there's no gaps between them. They cover each other up, but they're still able to articulate and move as the chitin moves. Chitons are found worldwide, from the Arctic freezing waters to the tropics, and they typically live on a hard substrate, most often rocks or in the crevices between rocks. Most species tend to live in that intertidal zone, so those tide pools, kind of like shorelines. Some have a range that expands the whole photic zone, which is the area where the light penetrates through completely. However, a few have adapted to a kind of deep sea lifestyle in that benthic zone, probably making their habitat, their niche in those hydrothermal vents that we kind of keep talking about as we talk about a lot of different invertebrates. One of the things we didn't talk about last week when we talked about worms was tube worms.
We did not talk about the tube worms yet.
They're famous
Yeah,
in these hydrothermal vents.
correct.
Different time, different place. Missed it last week. Oh well. But they are exclusively marine organisms. They do not inhabit freshwater or terrestrial environments. You can only find chitons in saltwater environments. Some cultures use this as a delicacy. Oftentimes coastal Native Americans off the Pacific have used them. Indonesian tribes.
Southeastern Asia.
Yeah, Southeastern Asia. Oceanic tribes like Polynesia, things like that. Places that have a lot of islands, that have a lot of access to these coastal intertidal pools, and they are dioecious. So as we've talked about repeatedly on this podcast, dioecious means that they have both genders, male and female organisms, and they fertilize externally. So the female will excrete her eggs, her female gametes. The male will kind of cloud out his sperm cells, his male gametes, and they will externally fertilize. There is no penetration involved, and similar to mammals. Alex, if you would like to talk about the Scaphopoda, if you would.
Yeah, so Scaphopoda, these these are the tusk shells. So they are the only group of infaunal mollusks. So they live their entire lives buried in sediment with only a small portion of the body above the sediment that they use to kind of feed. So one of the orders in this class, Gatolida, they use surprising speed to avoid predators. Then there are the dentalids, which is another order. They kind of freeze in place to avoid detection. So two different orders with two very different methods of survival. Yeah. The mantle is entirely in the shell, so it's that main portion there within the shell. And then they do have a small foot, but it is just used to bury in the substrate. So it's typically that base, kind of a bottom portion they use just to seat themselves until they're in the substrate, at which point they remain. They do not have gills, so that, like I said, this is a slightly more simple grouping of the mollusks. They don't have gills. They do absorb oxygen just from the water through the mantle cavity. Now, but since they are a pretty sedentary species, or grouping of organisms, I should not just one species, grouping of organisms, they're able to get away with that because they don't use a lot of energy and movement, which doesn't require a ton of oxygen at one time.
Their pattern for breathing, in quotes, so they suck in water through this dorsal mantle opening. So the top of their shell is a small flap that opens up. They'll suck in the water. Then about every 10 to 12 minutes, they'll expel this deoxygenated water. So they have 10 minutes for the water that's in their system to absorb oxygen from that water and then push it back out. I believe also through that opening at the dorsal end.
Okay. Yeah, and they have a fairly rudimentary vascular system, as a lacking auricles, so they sort of like I said, vascular system, like the blood is kind of, they actually do sort of have a system to move blood throughout the body, but it's very rudimentary, kind of hard to describe, especially from the picture you can see here. You don't see it too well.
Yeah, there's not really any descriptive or designated vessels in this organism.
Correct. Yeah, but they do have a more complex nervous system. That's something you see more in mollusks now. Similar to cephalopods, so you see it more, instead of like a brain where you have nerves connecting, it's more spread out into larger groupings called ganglia. You'll see these.
There's
some
pedal ganglia here that controls the foot. So the foot is what they use to burrow into the sediment of their habitat.
Yeah.
They have some ganglia up here. Cerebral ganglia is obviously the central ganglia. Cerebral head kind of controls the rest of the systems. I'm not sure the pural ganglia. Are you?
Plural. That's like the kind of the heart.
Oh, so it controls
Sort of.
the what you call
Like what would be sort of like their
it?
heart.
Circulatory
Yeah.
system. Yes.
Yeah. So
Right.
yeah. But as you can see, like I said, that dioecious is usually a large portion of that upper area is the reproductive organs. Of course, like pretty much any organism, the goal is to survive long enough to have offspring. So it's typically something like this that doesn't move a lot. You can see a small stomach. They don't need to eat a ton. A lot of their energy is produced or is used in the production of the next generation.
In the gametes, correct. Right.
So I think that concludes our lesson for this week. Like I said, we're just starting the mollusk, so don't get too crazy
Yeah.
yet,
Don't think
everybody.
we're speeding through this. We still
No.
got another.
Yeah.
We did the math before the session. It looks like 2 more weeks. We'll give a breakdown at the end of the episode on how we think we're gonna finish this off.
Yeah,
But
we'll talk more when we get there. I was going to say something, but more for as we get to the end.
yeah,
Sorry.
it's a concluding thought.
Yeah.
Jumbling my words today, I am. We'll
Yeah.
move on to the amazing species. I'll cover this first, since I plan on covering our new little bit for the show. Our amazing species this week is the plicate rock snail. I did my job this week and actually found a species that fits in our lesson, also known as Leptoxis plicata. It is critically endangered. So I know last week I said I'm learning how these things work, and I said that endangered species are established based off of how much their population decreases over 3 generations. I also learned that you can be classified based off of how much your range shrinks. So the plicate rock snail's range has been restricted by 90%. I'm not sure if this is since it was first evaluated, or if this is since it was first discovered as a species. Excuse me. But Alex, I'm not sure if you have the ICN page.
I do.
If you would like to share the map portion of it, I will
Yes, sir.
These are found in the Coosa River in Alabama in the United States of America. So if you could zoom in, please. So this gray area is where we are unsure if the species is extant or not. This is a former range where we have seen them in the past since discovery, but that yellow goldish area is where we are seeing them right now. And to my knowledge, there are about 15 shoals that are used by these snails.
It's a pretty. I mean, looking at the map, kind of doesn't give an idea of how this is a pretty large area, hundreds of miles of river that had snails, and they're not sure if they're there anymore or not. But it's been restricted to a fairly small portion of the river.
Right. Let's see here. The IUCN in its geographic range section. That's perfect. A picture of our snail, or Leptoxis plicata, or the plicate rock snail. It looks like any other snail you see, but it's home in Alabama. Has been reported by Goodrich in 1938 to inhabit forks of the Black Warrior River, in Walker County, Alabama, the Black Warrior River in Jefferson County, and Tuscaloosa County, and the Little Black Warrior River and Tombigbee River. However, right now the range is a short reach of the Locust Fork of the Black Warrior River, so that's where their shoals are located. About 88 kilometers, 55 mile stretch of habitat for the plicate rock snail.
It's a pretty significant decrease.
Yeah, we're talking about basically from the near northern tip of Alabama all the way to the coastline. Now we're condensed to this 55-mile strip in that north-central part of the state. We are decreasing in population, obviously, because we have condensed this population size down and the habitat range down to such a small area there, where we have about an 88-kilometer stretch, but is a 32-kilometer reach, where we are conducting surveys for population. The freshwater habitats, as you can assume based off of its river location, some of the common threats to population are kind of urbanization, housing development, commercial and industrial issues, mining and quarrying, kind of contribute to some acid mine drainage.
Mm-hmm.
AMD is a big problem when it comes to these freshwater habitats. A lot of population decline in some areas.
Yeah, it's a very significant change in water chemistry, which will, when we get to talk more about this, something that is a big deal for your freshwater mollusks, especially.
Yeah, maybe we'll have an episode after we cover the mollusks on habitat issue, like just some general things that occur, like why is habitat loss happening?
Yeah, like a bit of a ecology episode.
Yeah, like a mini episode.
Yeah.
Pollution, so that could be anything from urban sewage to industrial runoff to agricultural runoff, because fertilizers, as much as fertilizers help the farmers in the area and help us kind of pump in these organic nutrients to these to the farmland, they run off into our streams and cause algal blooms and things of that nature that aren't good for not only the invertebrates like mollusks, but also the vertebrates like fish, because they're getting choked out with a loss of oxygen, as well as deforestation. You might not think of it as a big problem for these more freshwater ecosystems, but no trees means that when it rains, the runoff causes all the sediment to run into the stream, which does not create a healthy ecosystem. Sediment's bad for. There's a certain threshold that we need for sediment, and if deforestation causes too much sediment to go into the stream, it causes a loss of quality in the water.
Correct. Yeah, and then as well, something that we do, damming and water management use, like making canals, things like that. Above it said these snails like that shallower, faster moving sort of water. But when you dam up the river, you back it up, slow it down, kind of makes it less desirable habitat for these snails.
Right, and so these snails prefer a more not swift-moving stream, but some type of flow in their ecosystem. But if you're adding these dams in, you're backing up the water to a point where this range might be cut off because you're cutting off all water flow with a dam, or shrinking down to a point where these snails can't survive. But you're creating these stationary like reservoirs and pools where the snails aren't quite adapted to. They don't survive off of a stationary pool of water. Right. That's all I have for the plicate rock snail.
All right. Well, then we'll move into my segment, which is Nature's Most Wanted, where we talk about an invasive species. And this week, I am talking about another mollusk. It is the Japanese mystery snail, which is, I'm going to butcher this scientific name, Sapangopaludina japonica. There, I think that's
Nailed it. Nailed it.
Not trying it again. It's about as good as we're getting. So it's a relatively large globose shelled snail. So you can see it's a kind of a more rounder size snail that kind of twists up into a smaller point. They're fairly light colored as juveniles, and they get a little darker brown as adults. But they are native to Japan, Taiwan, Korea, some of those islands in Eastern Asia.
I would have
How,
never guessed with the name of
yeah,
Japonica.
I know. However, they can now be found in a few freshwater systems in the United States. A lot of them along the East Coast, especially in Lake Superior and Lake Erie. So two of the Great Lakes, as well as I'm sure we'll be soon to find them in other Great Lakes because they're all connected.
For our visual listeners, if you hadn't seen already, that we had a image on screen of what these Japanese mystery snails look like, and now on screen I have for you all these red areas indicate areas where we have seen these mystery snails inhabit. So, like Alex said,
Correct.
Great Lakes, north here, Lake Michigan and Lake Erie, right? That's what you said.
Superior and
Superior. I lied. I can't name my lakes. All the way to California.
yeah. So yeah, out west in the western United States, not as significant of a threat yet, but especially in those eastern, and especially they're in in a few of the areas that feed to the Mississippi River. So over time, there's a good chance that they will spread throughout more of the United States because the Mississippi River covers pretty much the entire central half almost of the country. But they're not enormous. Some they found ones in Lake Erie, ranging between 30 and 65 millimeters tall and 22 to 46 millimeters wide. The females are slightly larger than the males at maturity. Kind of the problem is they feed on like detritus and sludge, which of course containing a lot of bacteria helps spread that, as well as in some of these areas it's fairly easy for them to get to, which allows them to boom to a large population. They can withstand a wide variety of uh, environmental conditions, water temperatures up to 30 degrees Celsius, which is very warm, and then down to 16 to 24 degrees Celsius. Very high turbidity, which is the cloudiness of that sediment we talked about before. They can tolerate a lot of sediment, very cloudy, kind of low oxygen concentration, because that cloudiness prevents aquatic plants from producing oxygen as efficiently, and where there's not a lot of vegetation either. It does not do well when the water dries up, so some of those marshy kind of like wetland sort of areas that sometimes dry out, they don't tend not to do well in that when there's extended periods of kind of hot, dry weather. But they're still very fairly tough. And then they
Well,
are
one thing I like to add is
yeah
when you and I took our invertebrate zoology classes way back when,
yeah
we did the kick nets. We did kick nets in our local stream ecology,
correct
and one of the ways to evaluate how healthy a stream was to kind of separate the organisms out that you found,
yeah
because a healthy ecosystem can support more species, and some species can't thrive in more turbid or more
like polluted environments.
polluted,
Yes,
nutrient depleted areas.
yes.
So where would this fit on that scale? This would
So
fit in the anywhere scale, like.
yeah, this fits pretty well in the anywhere scale.
I mean, I'm looking at some different occurrences we've seen, and you and I live in Pennsylvania. I'm seeing it found in the Lower Mon,
Yeah, in the Pittsburgh area.
and
Yeah,
we both know that's a pretty nasty spot.
correct. Especially historically, the water quality was very poor. It has improved over the last few decades. Um, However, still not quite to the pre-industrial revolution levels. And then,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Understood.
yeah. So of course, this species is viviparous as well, so it actually gives birth to live crawling young, doesn't just lay eggs. And the females can live a pretty long time for a small invertebrate. They can live up to 8 years, and they can carry between 10 to 120 young at a time. So they can produce a lot of young that are immediately able to move and feed, and allowing these to expand and thrive pretty quickly. And then another big issue beyond the typical invasive species of expanding rapidly with very few to no predators, kind of outcompeting native species, is it also hosts a lot of parasites, which in some cases affect human health. So they spread those parasites in areas where they will encounter people a lot. And it is kind of a nuisance when it's in very high densities. It actually gets caught by fishermen, like those that kind of use this like seine nets, like more like the larger net catching kind of fishing. So it is a lot of, like many of these invasive species, it expands rapidly and causes a lot of ecological and human health damage, as well as economic, as it affects the health of the native fish and kind of the native organisms that are used, especially in the Great Lakes region.
So, I like to add, I'm seeing that it's, as a parasite, it is a host to a Angiostrongylus cantonensis larvae, which is known to spread meningitis.
Correct.
So,
I did see that in here. I'm struggling to find it again, but I did see that. So a very nasty human health concern.
right. Something else I'd like to ask you is, has there been any research into native species that have developed this as a potential food source, or are they still in that shock and awe stage of, well, this is new and I've never seen it before and I don't want to eat it?
I don't think they're in that shock and awe stage, and I mean, on the article that I have here, it does not say specifically. Now, that something does eat it. I'm sure there's some, because it's not like a venomous or poisonous snail.
I'd like to assume that rainbow trout, or a trout in general, because
So some of your predatory fish species, yeah, this is a good
and
chance.
even catfish.
Yeah, catfish will eat just about anything.
Exactly.
But the bonus, the fact that, I mean, this is not a new invasive. It has been logged since the 60s, actually, in Arizona.
So we've been fighting this for upwards of 60 years
Yeah,
now.
actually, even earlier than that, in 1916 in Massachusetts. How it hasn't been seen in a while in some of these areas. So it's, like I said, it can withstand a lot, but as far as water temperatures go, it actually is not. It can't withstand cold temperatures. So even though, at least in more shallow water, that's why you don't see it in a lot of like the river systems.
Right.
Because once it gets too cold, you start getting to freezing levels. It doesn't tolerate freezing temperatures too much. So that's where that is kind of controlling it in a lot of cases. But when you start getting into your deeper rivers, deeper lakes that tend to not freeze, stay a little warmer in the wintertime, it's allowing them to survive. And that's why you'll see them in like some of the Great Lakes, which is surprising. Even Lake Erie, it's the shallowest of the Great Lakes, so it does freeze, although it has not frozen for a number of years, and is maybe able to get into some of those deep areas that don't quite freeze.
Yeah, they don't experience that seasonal turnover as other areas might.
Correct. Yeah, but it has been seen recently in a number of states within the last 10 years or so. There are some states that it was seen one time, maybe a couple times, but not recently. So it's, and of course, being snails, they don't move very quickly. And I'm sure some things do predate them. That's probably why they have not expanded to a massive problem that they could be.
I'm reading the chart on our source that we found. They have been seen in 25 states. However, some of these states haven't had occurrences since the 60s or even No, the 60s. Yeah, that's about the oldest, last observance I've seen.
Yeah, most of them it's either 2000, like mid to late 2000s, or more recent.
Right. So that conclude your most wanted for the week.
Yes, sir, it does.
Awesome. That's gonna bring us to our new segment for the week. So as we're getting into these more, I don't want to say hard-bodied because they're still very invertebrate, soft body, no skeletons, mostly just muscle. And, but these mollusks do have a calcium carbonate kind of footprint they leave behind, whether it's in a shell or what have you. So we're gonna be bringing you a new segment that we like to call From the Vault. Bringing you a species or a order or some type of grouping of organisms from the fossil record. So this week we'd like to cover the hyoliths. The hyoliths are a species, a grouping of bivalves from the Cambrian area. They look kind of goofy. As Alex and I were doing our pre-show, catch up and discussing what we covered for the episode, we were making the goofy type. They're goofy looking. Like, let's
Yeah,
look at. They
pull up
got
the
the.
picture so folks
Yeah, let's
can
pull up a
understand.
picture here before people kind of. I just
I
saved the
think I'm
picture.
sure they already think we're weird, but this is
Oh, I know they think we're weird, but
um.
like,
So
how could you not?
to describe it, it's kind of similar like the tusk shells that we saw or before. Similar shape where it's like kind of a longer, more tubular cone-shaped body. They have a head at the end with like some long. I don't know if they're like jaws or like almost like an antenna, not like an antennae, uh, but kind of a long structure, almost like little hand or jaw things, and then on the end, it's kind of where they get the bivalve. There's like a covering, which I believe is like an operculum, which we will talk about in more depth. Kind of that covering has a specific name, but they kind of those little arms kind of give it that little kind of that stereotypical kind of monkey looking, like it's trying to slurp up food to the mouth.
Right.
In there, yeah.
So before we make ourselves look like more fools by just doing hand gestures, the hyalists are very small uh, mollusks. Uh, in the uh, brachiopods are the grouping that have the two hard shells. Most often, why am I blanking on what's in this phylum, in this grouping?
I believe it is the. Let me look it up here. These are like your.
Like these are like oysters and stuff.
Yeah,
Correct?
they are the
They're
bivalves that are
hinged.
hinged at the rear of the, yeah. So
So,
like your clams.
so as you can see in the image, like the hinges in this area towards the back where the cone meets the cup. Before I just describe them in common terms, I'd like to explain that um, there is the conical main section and the operculum, which is the cap. Um, the cap is this little flat shell that opens up into a mouth. The arms that we've been talking of are called helens. These long structures that taper into a spiral. They were made of calcite. The operculum closes the whole shell, leaving two gaps which the helens protrude from, as well as they comprised of soft tissue. So it's not just a whole hard calcite shell. The soft tissue is made up of a band, which is that feeding organism, like at the base of the cone that houses the mouth, as well as 12 to 16 tentacles. So as you can see in the image, these tentacles kind of poking out of the operculum, which leads to a pharynx, kind of that primitive throat structure. Yeah, so very creepy, very funny looking, as much things in the Cambrian did look. But that's gonna do it for our from the vault section. Not much to talk about as we
Kind of,
talk about.
yeah, just
Yeah,
kind of something cool that's in the group that we're starting to look at. Something that's no longer existing, but just a kind of a cool little part of the fossil record that, I mean, in a lot of cases, there's reasons these didn't survive. Kind
right.
of that, or they have
Evolved into
ev-
something more streamlined.
correct. Yeah, they kind of evolved into a better, more functional form, leading to our modern organisms.
Right. And
Yeah.
as we maybe once we finish talking about things years from now, we'll talk about the different period, like geologic time periods, or maybe we'll cover those in our mini episodes that we do. Um, that
Almost
kind
like
of
a
cover
bonus
what
episode or something.
bonus episodes,
Yeah.
yeah, what the world looked like during these different geological time periods, because uh, the Cambrian, Ordovician, and the Permian, and the Devonian, four separate time periods that all had mass extinctions that basically wiped it to a clean slate for life as we know it. Obviously, the fifth extinction, that Jurassic extinction, or no, Cretaceous, right?
The
That's the final.
Cretaceous, yeah.
Uh,
That was the last like mass extinction that's classified as a, yeah, yeah. There were some minor extinctions in between there, like between the Jurassic and Triassic period, during the Mesozoic era, so the time of the dinosaurs. There was like a minor extinction, as
right.
well as a lot of people, when you think of that, think of the end of the Ice Age and the loss of the megafauna. Be
And
considered
during the Pleistocene, yes.
correct.
Um, but a lot of these Proterozoic time periods had their own mass extinctions that wiped out upwards of 75% of all living species. That would be really cool to cover in some bonus episodes. Maybe we'll throw them in maybe we'll highlight it before we get into the vertebrates.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, if
Because
we can.
um, but that will conclude our first segment on From the Vault, covering the hyolyths, these conical mollusks from the brachiopods, with their little Helen slopey arms
Yeah,
and their tentacle mouths.
yeah,
Very, very creepy, crazy. Nothing like that exists today.
yeah,
Um, and that'll bring us to the end of the episode.
yeah.
It's
So
been a heck of a time, Alex.
it has, yeah. So kind of what we said. The next two episodes, we're going to cover more of the mollusks. So we wanted to give, like, especially the gastropods, the cephalopods, like they need. We want to give them
These are
a fair amount of attention because they are very big groups within the mollusks, and that and the bivalves as well. That's why we're not trying to rush it all into one episode. Um, that's kind of
yeah,
what I was
which
going to say earlier.
we have over 10,000 species, over 100,000 species. My bad, I missed a digit there. Um, and put it in perspective for you, there's 70,000 species of gastropod, 20,000 species of bivalves. That's clams, mussels, oysters, everything in between that has shell, has like a shell, as well as cephalopods, which has almost 1,000 species. Like, that's a lot to cover, and we can't just cram that in one episode. We'll be missing all kinds of details.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um, so a slight overview for you guys for the next couple weeks. We will be covering cephalopods and bivalves in the next episode, and leaving the gastropods for the episode after that. We're gonna have a three-part discussion on mollusks, and then after that, we will move into arthropods and talk forever on arthropods, because there's even more arthropods than there are mollusks.
yeah. It's going to take us quite a bit to get through arthropods.
Yes.
There's a reason that we've been working up to that.
And then we'll finish our invertebrate part. I don't want to say half, because we're going to cover the vertebrates in more depth than we have the invertebrates, just because between orders and families, there's more differences than there are in the invertebrates. So we're going to give them more details per episode. But that'll cover our invertebrates after we finish the echinoderms in 2 months' time.
Yeah, it's going to take us a good while.
I'm not sure how long it'll take. I haven't really mapped out the schedule that far in advance. But as I said, next week is the cephalopods and bivalves, followed by the gastropods. As always, give us a like on not give us a like. Follow us on Spotify if you haven't
I think
already.
they can rate us as well.
You could rate us on Spotify. Good,
Yeah.
Good to know. Rate us on Spotify. Give us a 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
Subscribe on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Like our videos. Subscribe to our page on YouTube. Give us a comment. Let us know what we're doing wrong. What you want to see. Maybe a new segment that we haven't thought of yet. Follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram and Facebook. Instagram, it is Life Complete Story. On Facebook, it is Life the Complete Story Podcast. That's the Facebook page, Instagram page. Follow us on there. We post some kind of content,
some news
in
articles, some amazing species that don't quite make it in the episode, but are really cool. I've kind of been slacking on that, but I'm gonna pick it up as we move forward. As more time arises for me.
Yeah.
Send us an email at lifecompletestory at gmail.com. Ask us questions, recommend a discussion topic. We're always interested. Eventually, hopefully, we get enough questions that we can do a Q&A session on our social media pages. It'd be really cool to do an Instagram live, or something of that, like where we just answer your questions and you guys tune in. On our YouTube page. Hopefully, in the near future, we can get something planned between the two of us where we go to some type of place, whether it be out in the woods, the zoo, the aviary, the aquarium, something like that, so we can talk and give you guys a hands-on experience with us, the Complete Story crew.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it'd be kind of not necessarily. It'd be more like that. Some of those bonus content kind of things, but it'd be definitely be fun. Kind of something interesting that we get to do.
Not quite an episode of the podcast, but a bonus episode that you, as a subscriber of our channel, will get access to.
Yes. Absolutely, yeah. But as far as everything else, that kind of wraps us up for this week, I'd say. So, as we always say at the end of every episode, learn something new. You never know when it can become a lifelong interest.
Right.
Absolutely.
We'll end this episode as we always do. As you said, learn something new every day. Keep on learning. Make of it what you will. And we'll see you guys next week as we talk about the cephalopods and the bivalves.
Yes, sir. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.